friends, in this YouTube session, we'll be discussing about a very important disorder that is very commonly seen in children, that is rickets. Okay, so rickets is a disorder which is seen exclusively during childhood because it is a disorder of growing bones, and you have often got various questions related to the pathophysiology, the underlying causes, the clinical features, the images, the X-ray findings, the treatment of rickets in various forms, okay, and some important subtypes of rickets. So we'll be discussing in detail about this very important topic from pediatrics, that is rickets, from which you can expect more questions in future. Now, as we are moving towards the trend of next, where you're getting more and more case scenarios, this becomes increasingly more important in children. So let's discuss about rickets. You know, the word rickets means twisted. So, you know, the bones are really twisted and deformed in this rickets. So let us see what do we mean by rickets. Definition, the pathophysiology, the underlying causes, the lot of clinical features that you get, some special types of refractory rickets, okay, and finally the treatment and follow-up. All right. So let us start with the definition. So rickets is basically a disease of growing bones. You don't see it in adults, okay? So rickets, it is a disease of growing bones, okay, due to defective mineralization, okay, due to defective mineralization of the bone matrix at the growth plates in children, okay, of the bone matrix at the growth plates in children before the fusion of epiphysis, okay, at the growth plates in children before the fusion of their epiphysis, okay. So let us see what is the pathophysiology of this very important disorder, that is rickets. Now, we already mentioned that in rickets there is a defect in the mineralization of bones, okay. So what happens is there is defective mineralization. So there is defective mineralization of bone matrix at the growth plates, okay. Defective mineralization of bone matrix at growth plates. As a result of this, what happens? The growth plate cartilage and the osteoid continues to expand, okay. So the growth plate cartilage and the osteoid, that is the matrix, growth plate cartilage and the osteoid continues to expand, okay, continues to expand, but the mineralization is inadequate, okay. It is expanding but it is not getting mineralized, but mineralization is inadequate, okay. As a result of that, what will happen? If the bones don't get mineralized, the bones will be very soft. So there will be bony deformities can be there, okay, and even fractures can be there, okay. So as a result of this, what all can happen? So the bones are soft, so you can have bony deformities, okay, like bending of the long bones, okay. Double malleolus, then Harrison's sulcus, which is a groove-like thing that is formed. So bony deformities can be there, and recurrent fractures or pathological fractures are there. What do you mean by pathological fractures? So fractures even after trivial trauma are called pathological fractures, okay. So bones are soft. What else? the bone width will also increase at the metaphyseal end. Okay, so the bone width increases at growth plate and the distal end of metaphysis. Okay, bone width increases at growth plate and distal end of metaphysis. Okay, at growth plate and distal end of metaphysis. Okay, and distal end of metaphysis. As a result of that, what will happen? So because of that, we will get features like wrist widening, flaring of the anterior ends of the ribs, which gives rise to rachitic rosary. Okay, so we get features like wrist widening. Okay, and other deformities of rickets, right? So that is the pathophysiology that is happening in rickets. So what did we say? We said there is defective mineralization of bone matrix. That is the basic defect. The mineralization of bone matrix is not taking place adequately. As a result of that, what is going to happen? The growth plate cartilage and the osteoid continues to expand. But as we already said, the mineralization is inadequate. Okay, so the bones are soft. Okay, if the bones are not mineralized, what will it be? It will be soft. So you can see all sorts of bony deformities, pathological fractures. Okay, we can see bony deformities and fractures, and the bone width increases, as we said, at the growth plate and distal end of metaphysis, and that gives rise to features like wrist widening. So that is the pathophysiology of this very important disorder, rickets. Moving ahead to the etiology of rickets in children. So remember, the most common cause of rickets is nutritional deficiency of vitamin D. Okay, of rickets is nutritional deficiency of vitamin D. Alright, on etiological basis, we can divide the rickets into nutritional rickets and refractory rickets. Okay, so nutritional rickets and refractory rickets. Okay, now this nutritional rickets can be either due to vitamin D deficiency or calcium deficiency or phosphate deficiency. Mainly they are deficient from the diet. Okay, so it can be due to either vitamin D deficiency, calcium deficiency, or phosphate deficiency. Now vitamin D deficiency can have a lot of underlying causes, like it can be due to congenital deficiency. So the stores of vitamin D in the mother was also low. So in breast milk, we already know vitamin D is not very adequate. Okay, so there can be congenital deficiency because of the low stores in the mother, or there can be poor dietary intake or inadequate dietary intake. Inadequate dietary intake can be there, taking it in the diet, but it is not getting absorbed properly due to some reason. So malabsorption. So malabsorption, or any liver disease or kidney disease can also give rise to it, because in liver we have the 25 hydroxylase enzyme, which is required to produce 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, and in kidney you have the 1 alpha hydroxylase enzyme, which is required for 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 synthesis. So any kidney or any liver or kidney disease. So liver and or kidney disease. Now what do you mean by the term refractory rickets? So refractory rickets are basically difficult to treat rickets which do not respond to the usual treatment that we give for nutritional rickets. Okay, so refractory rickets refers to the category, the rickets that does not respond to the usual treatment of nutritional rickets. does not respond to the usual treatment of nutritional rickets. Okay. That means even after giving adequate dose of vitamin D or calcium as you give, as we'll be discussing, if you do a X-ray, there is no radiological healing documented by 4 weeks. Normally, we should be able to see some radiological evidence of healing by 4 weeks in a child with nutritional rickets after treatment. Okay. So the categories included in refractory rickets include, refractory rickets include some categories like VDDR, vitamin D dependent rickets type 1 and 2, that we'll be discussing in more detail. Okay, VDDR types 1 and 2 we'll be discussing subsequently. Then there's something called hypophosphatemic rickets or familial hypophosphatemic rickets. Okay, hypophosphatemic rickets. Then chronic kidney disease can also give rise to rickets. So chronic kidney disease or CKD. Okay. And in rickets due to chronic kidney disease, remember the phosphate levels are elevated. Unlike rickets due to other causes where the phosphate levels usually remain normal or low, but in CKD there is increased phosphate load. So the phosphate levels are going to be elevated. Okay. Then renal tubular acidosis, either proximal or distal RTA. Proximal RTA presents with rickets when it is a part of the Fanconi syndrome, because then there will be loss of bicarbonate, phosphate, everything. Okay, and distal RTA can present with rickets as well. So either proximal as a part of Fanconi syndrome or distal RTA. Okay, and the rickets can also be oncogenous or tumor induced. So oncogenous or tumor induced. So some benign mesenchymal tumors may secrete FGF23, which can cause phosphaturia and which can inhibit with the 1-alpha hydroxylase enzyme, giving rise to rickets. But these rickets improve after the removal of the tumor, but they do not respond to the usual treatment. Okay. So oncogenous or tumor induced, as we mentioned, some benign mesenchymal tumors. Benign mesenchymal tumors, we all know what are the examples of some benign mesenchymal tumors. So like rhabdomyoma, leiomyoma, osteoma. So some benign mesenchymal tumors, okay, may secrete FGF23. Which may give rise to phosphaturia and hypophosphatemia. Okay, and which can cause rickets, which improves after the removal of the tumor. So out of these, very important entities are the VDDR type 1 and 2 and hypophosphatemic rickets, which we'll be discussing in more detail subsequently. Okay, moving on to the clinical features of rickets. So there can be some general features like the child has failure to thrive, does not gain weight adequately. Okay, so there can be failure to thrive. There can be protruded abdomen, listlessness, the child is uninterested in surroundings, all the features of malnutrition. So there can be protruded abdomen due to visceroptosis. Okay, there can be listlessness. Okay, in rickets there is also increased risk of respiratory infections. So these children can have recurrent pneumonias. Why is it so? So increased risk of respiratory infections. Now this is there because there is softening of ribs. So what happens, as the ribs are softened during inspiration, you cannot, it will impair the air movement during respiration because the ribs cannot get pulled properly during inspiration. So basically this increased risk of respiratory infection is because of the softening of ribs that impairs air movement during respiration. Okay. And there is of course increased risk of fractures as we mentioned because the bones are soft. Okay. So these are some general features. Now coming to some other features. So starting from the head of the baby, head and face. What do you get in head and face? So in the head, involving the head and face of the baby, you can get something known as craniotabes in the neonatal or infantile period, which is said to be the earliest sign of rickets. So craniotabes is basically due to softening of the skull bone. And it is just like if you press on the skull bone, you get a sensation as if you are pressing a ping pong ball and releasing it. So it is quite soft. Okay. So craniotabes is due to softening of cranial bones. Okay. And you get a sensation similar to pressing a ping pong ball and releasing. Okay. On pressing the skull. And it is also seen in, so this craniotabes is not specific for rickets. It can also be seen in osteogenesis imperfecta, hydrocephalus, congenital syphilis, prematurity. Okay, can also be seen in osteogenesis imperfecta, congenital syphilis, hydrocephalus, or prematurity. Okay, what else? You can get prominence of the frontal bones and the parietal bones. That is called frontal bossing, parietal bossing. So you can get frontal and parietal bossing. Then there can be large anterior fontanelle and delayed closure of anterior fontanelle can also be there. So large anterior fontanelle and delayed closure of AF. Okay. Delayed closure of AF can be there. And there can be delayed dentition and dental caries as well. So delayed dentition and dental caries. Alright. Now coming to the chest. What all can you see? So we can get something known as rachitic rosary. So beading of the costochondral junctions due to flaring of the anterior ends of the ribs. So we said widening of the ends of bones occurs. Okay. So rachitic rosary is basically visible as beading of the costochondral junctions. Okay. And you can also get something known as Harrison's sulcus. That is because of the pull of the diaphragm on the soft ribs. So a groove-like area may be formed on the ribs at the area where the diaphragm is attached. Okay. So you can get something known as Harrison's sulcus, which is due to pulling of the softened ribs by the diaphragm. Due to pulling of softened ribs by diaphragm during respiration. Right? So this is the image of a child with rickets. You can see the prominent frontal and parietal bones are there. So it is frontal bossing is there. Okay, you can get parietal bossing also. What else? You can see that the bones are bent. Okay, so soft bones, bent bones. You can see there is wrist widening. The wrist is widened. Okay, so there is wrist widening. What else you can see here? Can you appreciate that the costochondral junctions appear beaded? So there is prominence of the costochondral junctions. Okay, so beading of the costochondral junctions is there. So that is called rachitic rosary. Okay, beading of the costochondral junctions is called rachitic rosary. Rachitic means in rickets and rosary means the rounded appearance. Okay, so bending of bones is there. You can also see bowing of tibia. The tibia is also bent here. Then there is pot belly or visceroptosis is there. Okay, so these are some of the features that you can get in rickets. And what do you see here? Can you appreciate this groove like thing here? Okay, a sulcus or groove like thing in the ribs. It is at the attachment of diaphragm. So this is known as Harrison's sulcus. Okay, so this groove like thing here is known as Harrison's sulcus. So this groove like area. Okay, is known as Harrison's sulcus. All right. So involving the limbs, what you can get? So as we already mentioned, we can get wrist widening. Okay, wrist widening, and we know why. So that is a very important clinical feature because wrist is usually easily accessible and visible when a child comes to you for examination. Okay. Now there can be genu valgum or verum deformities. Genu means at the knee. Okay. So genu verum or valgum deformities can be there. Alright. So genu verum will appear somewhat like this. So the knees are deviated towards the inward direction. These are also called bow legs or genu verum. And genu valgum will appear like this. So they are bent outwards. The legs are bent outwards as if the knees are knocking with each other. So it is called knock knees. Okay. Genu valgum or knock knees. Alright. So wrist widening, genu verum or valgum. Sometimes what happens, you can also get windswept deformity. So there can be a windswept deformity where there is varus deformity of one leg and valgus deformity of the other leg, as if the wind has come from here and swept the feet to that side. Okay. So that is the windswept deformity that you can see. Then you can get bowing or bending of tibia. Another important clinical feature which is often mentioned, you get double malleoli. Now what do you mean by this double malleoli? Let us see. So if you examine the ankle, the region of medial malleolus, usually you get one medial malleolus as a prominence. But what you can get in rickets is, if this is the toe, this is the foot with the toes. Okay. So this is the medial malleolus. This is the medial malleolus. You can get one more prominence above the medial malleolus here. So this is known as double malleoli. Okay. Why do you get it? Because the distal tibia has to bear all the weight of the child, and if it is not strong enough, what will happen? So there will be the distal end of it will get widened and a ridge can form, a metaphyseal ridge or ledge or ridge can form above the medial malleolus due to the pressure that it is trying to bear but not able to bear. So instead of one prominence, you can get two prominences on the medial side of the ankle, which is called double malleoli. Okay. Right. So these are some features which you can get involving the limbs in rickets. So there can be some features due to hypocalcemia as well, because as we know, vitamin D deficiency is going to give rise to hypocalcemia also. Okay. So hypocalcemia can give rise to features like tetany, okay, where you have the carpopedal spasm of the hands like this. Okay. So it can cause tetany, it can give rise to seizures in a child. Stridor can be there because of the laryngospasm. Okay. Then there's a Trousseau sign and Vostek sign in medicine also, you might have discussed about it. So Trousseau sign is when you put a sphygmomanometer cuff and inflate it above the systolic pressure for around 3 minutes or so. You will see that the hands will assume a characteristic posture, which is like the flexion at the metacarpophalangeal joint and extension at the interphalangeal joint, and the thumb will get adducted like this. So this typical posture you will get on inflating the sphygmomanometer cuff. That is Trousseau sign. And what is Vostek sign? So you can get Vostek sign where what happens is, because of hypocalcemia, the nerves become hyper excitable. So if you tap in front of the ear at the facial nerve, so you can get ipsilateral twitching of the face. Okay, so that is this Vostek sign. Out of these two, Trousseau sign is considered to be more specific for hypocalcemia. So these are some clinical features that we can get in a child with rickets. Now on investigations in a child with nutritional rickets, you can do two set of investigations mainly. They are the biochemical investigations and the radiological investigations. In the biochemical analysis, the serum calcium may be normal or low. Serum phosphate, we mentioned already, can be normal or low depending on the underlying cause. Alkaline phosphatase levels are usually very high. So alkaline phosphatase levels are high. And in nutritional rickets, the 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 levels will be usually low. So 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, or it is also called 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol level. Okay, 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 or 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol levels are usually low. So they are usually lower than 10 nanogram per ml, or some sources say 12 nanogram per ml, or if you take it in another unit, if it is lower than 30 millimoles per liter, it is taken as abnormal or insufficient. The normal level of 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 is usually taken to be more than 20 nanogram per ml or more than 50 nanomoles per liter. Okay, so these are the usual findings that you get on biochemical analysis. Now on radiological imaging, so X-ray of usually either wrist or knees are done. So weight bearing, usually a child will start crawling, and also the wrist joint is usually the earliest where you get the changes. And once the child is able to stand and walk, you can get changes in the knee joint as well. So X-ray of wrist or knees are usually done. Okay, and what do you get? The first change that is seen on the X-ray is due to, so the first change is due to loss of the normal zone of provisional calcification near the metaphysis. So due to loss of the normal zone of provisional calcification adjacent to metaphysis. So what happens? So metaphysis becomes very irregular. So there is fraying of the end of the long bone. Okay. So adjacent to metaphysis, that will give rise to blurring of metaphyseal margin, or the margin will become irregular. So blurring of metaphyseal margin, that gives rise to fraying or irregularity of the ends of the long bones. What else? The cartilage hypertrophy. Cartilage hypertrophy leads to widening of the growth plate. Widening of growth plate. Okay. So this widening of the growth plate leads to widening of the ends of the long bone, that is called splaying. Okay. And because the bone is soft, so pressure is coming on it, so there will be a cupping. Okay. So this will give rise to splaying. And because the bones are soft bones, and they are coming in contact with the carpal below, so soft bone is there and carpal is there below, so it will give rise to a cupping. Okay, so soft bones will give rise to the cupping, and eventually generalized reduction in bone mineral density, giving rise to osteopenia. So eventually you will get generalized reduction in bone mineral density, giving rise to osteopenia, generalized osteopenia. So these are the findings that we will get in an X-ray with rickets. So what all we said? Fraying or irregular margin of the long bones. Splaying means the ends of the long bones will get widened, and cupping means there will be a concavity of the end of the long bones, and there will be a generalized reduction in bone mineral density or osteopenia. So what do you see in rickets? So we said the characteristic findings are cupping, splaying and fraying of the ends of the long bones, and generalized reduction in bone mineral density. So can you appreciate? So these are the ends of metaphysis that we are talking about. So can you appreciate that it has become cup-like, like this? There's a concavity, if you can see. So this is what we mean by cupping. Can you see the irregularity here? Okay, blurring of the end of metaphysis is there. So that is the fraying. Okay, and you can see the widening of the end of long bone like this. So that is the splaying. And of course, there is a generalized reduction in the bone mineral density or osteopenia. So we get the cupping, the fraying and the splaying of the ends of long bones, which is characteristic of X-ray in rickets, which can come as a spotter for you. Okay. So the out of these, the earliest sign that is seen is usually fraying. Okay. So that is what you get in X-ray wrist in rickets. Very, very important for you to know. Okay. Now, once the treatment of rickets is done, you can see a white line, a radiological line of healing by about 4 weeks of starting treatment if the child has responded well to treatment. Okay. Now, coming to what is the currently recommended treatment for rickets in children. So, in neonates and infants, so there is a dose of vitamin D that is recommended and a dose of calcium that is recommended. Okay. So in neonates and infants, it is recommended to give 2000 international units of vitamin D per day plus 500 milligram per day of calcium. While in older children 1 to 18 years of age, it is recommended to give 3000 to 6000 international units of vitamin D per day for treatment of rickets. This we are talking about the treatment of rickets, okay, not the prophylaxis. So 3000 to 6000 international units per day of vitamin D. These are the latest recommendations, along with 600 to 800 mg per day of calcium. Now this treatment should be given for a minimum period of 3 months. So this treatment should be given for a minimum of 3 months. Minimum 3 months, followed by you start them on maintenance dose of vitamin D and calcium. Okay, and you have to improve their diet, make it more vitamin D and calcium rich. Okay. Alternatively, you may also give a schedule where you don't want to give daily treatment. Weekly treatment can be given, but only in children more than 3 months age. So alternatively, there is another regime which may be followed. So alternatively, for infants more than 3 months age, 60,000 international units of vitamin D may be given weekly for 6 weeks. Weekly for 6 weeks. So these are the two regimes that are usually followed, either a daily or a weekly regime as per the latest Indian guidelines. Okay. Now, as we said, if you've started the treatment and if the child is responding to it, then by 4 weeks, you can get some improvement in the x-rays. You can see a radiological line of healing. Okay, that can be there. All right, and slowly resolution of the features of rickets will be there. But if the child is not responding to this usual treatment, then we think of the refractory rickets, and we've already mentioned what can be the causes of refractory rickets in children. Let us now discuss about a few of the important causes of refractory rickets in some more detail. So vitamin D dependent rickets or VDDR is one such cause which is very important for you to know. So VDDR or vitamin D dependent rickets refer to some autosomal recessive inherited rickets. Okay. So autosomal recessive inherited rickets which usually manifest early on in life during infancy. Okay. Usually manifest during infancy. There are two types of vitamin D dependent rickets, VDDR1 and VDDR2. Okay. So VDDR1, VDDR type 1, very easy to remember. So VDDR type 1 is due to deficiency of the 1-alpha hydroxylase enzyme, which is there in the kidney, which is required for the formation of active form of vitamin D, that is 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. So VDDR type 1 is due to deficiency of 1-alpha hydroxylase enzyme, which is required for the conversion. So this enzyme is present, as we know, in the kidneys, and it is required for the conversion of 25-hydroxy vitamin D3 to 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3, which is the active form of vitamin D. So it is required for the formation of active form of vitamin D. Alright. So the clinical features in VDDR type 1 will be same as the features of rickets that we've discussed, but it will have an early onset in the life and you can get a family history as well. And on investigation, What all will you get? So because the active form of vitamin D is not getting formed, so vitamin D action is not taking place. So what will happen? Calcium absorption is not taking place properly. So you can get decreased blood calcium levels. So decreased blood calcium levels. Phosphate absorption is also not taking place properly. So you can get normal to low phosphate levels. Alkaline phosphatase we know will be high. It is high in all types of rickets. So increased alkaline phosphatase levels. Okay, increased alkaline phosphatase levels. And if you do the 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 levels, which we usually do to know vitamin D3 deficiency is there or not, that will also be normal, because there is no problem with that. There is problem in the final conversion step, where the formation of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 is there. So you will get normal 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 levels. So usually we do this vitamin D3 level only. Okay. But if you do the 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 level, this will be markedly low despite the hypocalcemia. Okay. So this level will be markedly low despite the hypocalcemia. All right. So how do you treat this VDDR1? So for the treatment, you have to supplement the active form of vitamin D. Okay. So for the treatment, you have to use calcitriol, or the active form of vitamin D has to be given, and along with calcium, with or without phosphate, depending on deficiency, whether it is there or not. Okay. Moving on to VDDR type 2. Now VDDR type 2 is a disorder where there is end organ resistance at the level of receptors to the action of vitamin D. So even though the active form of vitamin D3 is present now, but it is not able to act because the receptors of vitamin D3 are resistant to it. So basically this is due to end organ resistance to the action of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3. So here the active form of vitamin D3, even though it is present, it is not able to act. So that is why this type of rickets is also known as vitamin D resistant rickets. Vitamin D resistant rickets. So even though large amount of vitamin D3 is present in circulation, but it is not able to act, and you still get the clinical features of rickets in this condition. Okay. And there are some other clinical features also. So apart from the clinical features of rickets that we already discussed, so there will be early onset rickets. There can be a similar history in the siblings. Okay. And there is a high prevalence of alopecia in this disorder. Though the exact cause is not known, it is seen that these children have sparse or absent hair. So high prevalence of alopecia and ectodermal defects like dental abnormalities can be there, skin lesions can be there. Okay. So and ectodermal defects like oligodontia, melia and epidermal cysts. Oligodontia, decreased number of teeth, melia or skin rash, and epidermal cysts can be there associated. Okay. On investigation, what are you going to get here? So here we said the vitamin D active form is present, but it is not able to act. Now vitamin D helps in the absorption of calcium and phosphate from the intestine, and reabsorption of calcium and phosphate from renal tubules also, and it helps in the mineralization and modeling of the bones as well. Okay. So what will happen? Absorption of calcium and phosphate is not going to take place here then. So there will be hypocalcemia. Secondary hyperparathyroidism can be there. So hypocalcemia and hypophosphatemia can be there. Okay. Secondary hyperparathyroidism features can be there. And if you do the levels of 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 and 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3, they will be elevated rather than being deficient. So elevated 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 level. So this helps in distinguishing, the vitamin D3 level helps in distinguishing between VDGR type 1 and type 2. Okay. Now the treatment is very difficult here. The response to the supplementation of vitamin D and calcium is not very satisfactory because vitamin D is already present in the body, but it is not able to act. So the treatment involves administration of large doses of calcium. Large doses of calcium for prolonged period. Okay. Along with calcitriol, sometimes it may be given, but response to treatment is usually not satisfactory. Okay, response to treatment is not satisfactory. So that is why it is called vitamin D resistant rickets, because vitamin D, even though it is present, it is not able to act. So the functions which are there of vitamin D will not take place properly. All right. Moving on to a little bit about another important cause of rickets from which you often get questions, that is familial hypophosphatemic rickets. This rickets is important, one, because it has a unique mode of inheritance. It is X-linked dominant, one of the very few disorders with X-linked dominant inheritance. So most common mode of inheritance of familial hypophosphatemic rickets is X-linked dominant inheritance. All right. And what is the gene that is involved? So the gene involved in familial hypophosphatemic rickets is the PHEX gene, PHEX. Okay, it is often asked. So the PHEX gene. So PHEX stands for phosphate regulating gene. So it stands for phosphate regulating gene with homology to an endopeptidase on X chromosome. With homology or similarity to an endopeptidase on X chromosome. Okay. So this is the PHEX gene, phosphate regulating gene with homology to an endopeptidase on X chromosome, PHEX, PHEX. The function of this PHEX gene is to produce an endopeptidase. So PHEX gene normally produces an endopeptidase that is responsible for the breakdown of FGF23. That is responsible for breakdown of FGF23, fibroblast growth factor. Breakdown of FGF23, fibroblast growth factor. So what is the pathophysiology? What will happen if this PHEX gene mutation is there? So pathophysiology in familial hypophosphatemic rickets. So what will happen? So there is a PHEX gene mutation, we said. So mutation of the PHEX gene. Mutation of PHEX gene. So increased FGF23 levels, because the endopeptidase that is breaking down, that is responsible for breaking down FGF23 is not there. So FGF23 will not get broken down. So there will be increase in FGF23 levels. Now this high FGF23 level will do two things. So high FGF23 levels will cause excessive renal loss of phosphate, okay, phosphaturia. So it will cause excessive renal loss of phosphate, giving rise to phosphaturia and hypophosphatemia, okay, hypophosphatemia. All right. What else? It also inhibits the activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase. So it inhibits or decreases the activity of renal 1 alpha hydroxylase, as a result of which the blood levels of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 remain low despite hypophosphatemia. Okay, we know hypophosphatemia is a stimulator of 1 alpha hydroxylase enzyme. So whenever hypophosphatemia is there, normally the level of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 should increase, but it does not happen in familial hypophosphatemic rickets because the FGF23 will decrease the activity of renal 1 alpha hydroxylase. As a result of that, we will get low blood levels of vitamin 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3. So we'll get low blood level of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 despite hypophosphatemia. Despite hypophosphatemia. Alright. Coming to the clinical features of hypophosphatemic rickets, what happens? So lower limb deformities are quite common in this entity. So lower limb deformities are common. Skull deformities and dental abnormalities can be present. Okay. Skull deformities and dental abnormalities seen. But there are absent symptoms of hypocalcemia because here there is predominantly hypophosphatemia. Hypocalcemia is usually not a feature. Absent symptoms of hypocalcemia like tetany, seizures and all will not be there. Stridor. So absent symptoms of hypocalcemia. On investigation, the serum calcium level is usually normal or maybe mildly decreased. Usually normal or mild decrease. Serum phosphate levels are definitely low, less than 3 mg per dl. So serum phosphate levels are low. It is usually in the range of 1.5 to 3 mg per dl. Alkaline phosphatase, like in all causes of rickets, will be increased. Alkaline phosphatase increased. Parathormone level usually normal. But 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 level is inappropriately low to the level of hypophosphatemia. So 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 level inappropriately low for the level of serum phosphate. Okay. So inappropriately low for the serum phosphate. And if you do urine phosphate may be increased because there is phosphaturia. So urine phosphate level will be increased because there is phosphaturia. And how do you treat it? So you have to treat it with high doses of oral phosphate and vitamin D3. Okay. So the treatment is with high doses of oral phosphates and vitamin D3 supplementation, usually in the form of alpha calcidiol. So that is about hypophosphatemic rickets. So rickets, as you can see, is a very, very important topic for you, and questions can come from different aspects and we need to be prepared for it.